Hello, everybody. Good evening. I was going to say good afternoon there, I don't even know the time anymore. Well, hello, everybody. Hello to everybody who's locked in the Zoom call. And welcome to the third episode of TAMS Talks. This is also going to be the last episode of the year. Well, I guess also the last episode of season 1. Wow, man, time is really passing. It is really passing. But yes, for everybody who does not know me, for all of the new viewers watching live on YouTube, my name is Kareem, and I am a third-year medical student at King's College London, and I am also the TAMS Network Director. So just one of the people behind this whole thing. Okay, so before we get started with tonight's talk, I'm just going to quickly explain the agenda for today and give a quick intro about who we are and what we do. And then also, then after that, our speaker is going to impart some incredible wisdom on all of us. And then we're going to wrap it up with a quick Q&A. So make sure you are thinking about questions throughout so that, we've got stuff to talk about at the end, obviously. Right, so for those who don't know and everybody who's new, what is TAMS? So to put it simply, TAMS is the Aspiring Medic Support. We are a registered community interest company, and we support aspiring and current, we support aspiring medical students and current medical students who are aspiring medics, aspiring doctors. And we especially focus on students from a socio-economically disadvantaged background. And as you saw in the intro video, we break this down into the 3 E's, which are engage, erase, and equip. So our whole aim is about providing students with the necessary tools to support career aspirations and progression, and assisting with everything from getting into medicine to succeeding in medicine and becoming the best doctor that you can be. So what is TAMS Talks? This is, well, like I said, it's the 3rd episode today, and as a widening participation company, our work doesn't just stop once we get students into medicine. We then also have to support everybody once they're in and make sure that we all become the best doctors that we can be. TAMS Talks is a monthly talk developed by us to aid the personal and professional development of all of the medical students and doctors within our community, and also taking into account the unique challenges associated when you come from a socio-economically disadvantaged background. So just to summarize that, in essence, we seek to expose the hidden curriculum and bridge the attainment gap between medical students. So in the last 2 months, we've successfully organized and delivered 2 TAMS talks on time management and studying at medical school. And we aim to engage with issues that are relevant to the medical students, but are not necessarily covered in academic settings. So that brings me on to today's talk. As you already know from the title, today's talk is all about how to get involved in research while at medical school. So we thought, who better to give a talk on how to get involved in research than a doctor who does exactly that, right? So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Our speaker today is Dr. Kirsty Biggs, and Dr. Kirsty Biggs is an academic FY2, which is, as you know, a foundation year 2 doctor. And she has a strong passion for research, especially in women's health and medical education. So throughout her career, she's had numerous publications, won various prizes, and presented at international conferences. That's right, she's flying out and she's just talking to all of these people from other countries. So we are incredibly honored to have her here today talking to all of us. And without further ado, I'm just going to pass it over to Kirsty, because that is, it's your show. So thank you, Kirsty. Take it away.
Mute myself. Just give me a second, guys. I'm just going to load up my presentation. Share. Fab. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name's Kirsty. I'm, as been very well introduced, I'm an academic foundation doctor working in Stoke. My research block is in obstetrics and gynecology, so that's something I'm particularly interested in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk you through a bit about my own personal experience and the sort of things I got involved in as a medical student. And I'm then going to be talking about various different ways that you can equip yourself with skills and experience that will help you with your careers, not just if you want to be an academic doctor, but actually these sort of things look good on your application regardless of what sort of work you want to do in the future. So I always say you should be looking out for your future self, and hopefully these will give you a few tools to help you to do so. Okay, so just to start, I went to medical school in Brighton. I'm going to talk a bit about just quickly a few things that I did when I was there. So as a first year student, I joined the Research Society. I didn't necessarily think that it would be something that I wanted to carry on with as my career, but I had heard that if you get things like publications, it looks very good on your job applications later. And I thought, oh, I've joined a lot of other societies. I'll see what this one's about. So I ended up working with a fourth year student, and we wrote a letter to editor together, which has been published, and you get the points for having a PubMed identification on that, so it looks good on your application. And I also did a best bet review, which is a bit like a systematic review but less in depth. And I presented a poster at an international conference from that. That didn't get published, though. I'll go into talk about a few issues around that later. I then decided to intercalate. I did a intercalation at Imperial College London, which was in reproductive and developmental science, as I really liked my obs and gynae placement when I was a third year. I did my dissertation, and that was later published. Bear in mind, I intercalated back in 2015, but this paper didn't get published until 2019. So just to give you an idea, things do take a long time to go into press. But one of the biggest things I got from my intercalation was that I realized that research was something for me, and I developed an interest in breastfeeding medicine, which I then took forward when I went back to medical school and set up my own project. We also, at Brighton, we have to do a individual research project as part of our fourth year. I know some medical schools have sort of student selected components or aspects where they can get involved. They sort of have dedicated time to get involved in research or doing audits. So that I think is very worthwhile if you get the opportunity to do so. So I'm just going to talk about some of the most common ways that people get themselves involved in this sort of thing. So I decided to intercalate. A lot of medical schools will allow all students to, some allow all students, some more selective of who can and can't intercalate. For me, this gave me the best opportunity to get a taste for research. The majority of MScs or BScs have a dissertation to them, so you get dedicated time to get involved in research. It's an opportunity to develop some new skills and to decide whether it's something you actually enjoy or not. Because if it's not, that's okay, but it's a good experience to be able to work that out. I also found this was a useful way of making contacts. I enjoyed the people I worked with and the subject topic, and I actually went back to them once I was back in Brighton because I wanted to work with them again, and they were really good supervisors. Projects tend to either be divided into lab-based projects, library projects. By this, I mean projects that you don't need to either be with patients or you don't need to be in a lab. So this is quite often doing systematic reviews, or it might be reviewing retrospective data. And the last option is for something that's patient-facing. So for my project, I was doing, I designed some questionnaires, which I then went and did surveys with women on the postnatal ward and with members of staff. I think, yeah, the biggest thing from intercalation was just finding out what you actually like. This isn't obviously the be all and end all, but it's intercalation is a great opportunity to do so. Audits or service evaluations. So this is something that literally anyone can do. One way to go about that would be to sort of, once you get onto your clinical placements, ask one of the doctors you work with if there are any ongoing projects that you could potentially get involved with. I'd advise you to pick something that you're interested in, as audits are things that are quite easily presented at conferences. And if you are interested in surgery and you do a surgical project, you can go and attend a surgical conference and you'd actually be learning about things that you're interested in. So I'd highly recommend doing that. The other good thing about audits are they don't require ethics approval, which takes quite a long time. So it means that you can actually get on with the data collection straight away. And if you've got a limited time before finishing medical school and you want to get a project off the ground, it's a great opportunity to do so. Generally, so audits are a way of, in comparison to research, audits are a way to see whether the clinical standards are being met in a particular environment, and perhaps actually on your placement you've observed something that you think could be improved or isn't meeting the standards necessary, and that could, so there's absolutely nothing stopping you going forward to one of your supervisors and actually suggesting a project yourself. That would be a great thing to do if you've got some ideas. So this is just a summary of what an audit is in comparison to research. Identifying an issue, looking at the standards, you then collect the data, and the idea is you can then implement some sort of change. So that might be as simple as a sticker that goes in a patient's notes to say that someone's double checked what antibiotics they're on, or whatever the issue is you're looking at. And then the idea is that you recollect the data and see whether you've improved things. So it's a great way to get involved and also actually improve clinical practice. And it's something that you'll actually be required to do as a junior doctor. So it's great if you can get some experience early on. Other things and other ways you can develop your academic skills are getting involved in conferences or study days. Many of these are actually free, especially since they've gone virtual, so they don't have to give you any lunch or anything like that. Student conferences as well, so ones that you don't have to be presenting at national or international conferences. You'll still get the experience of presenting by attending student conferences, and these are often a bit more budget friendly. It's also worth knowing, you may not be aware of this, but most universities have a budget for students who are presenting, because you are going somewhere to represent the university, and often they have money to be able to support you in doing so. Another tip, you can also present the same, if you do one project, there's nothing stopping you presenting it at more than one conference, and actually that will give you more points on your application. So that's something worth bearing in mind. So just to summarize, the opportunities you can get, you develop your presenting skills, there's the opportunity for prizes, you can network, and I often find that conferences are very inspiring places. They give me ideas for projects that I might want to do in the future. So a few other ways to develop skills that are useful in academia. So taking on leadership or management roles. These can be, I know at medical school, there are always opportunities for committees. So I'd make sure you get involved with something that you're interested in. It doesn't have to be academic. You could be running a sports team or taking a role on the painting society. It really doesn't matter. Teaching opportunities to take up. You could set up your own journal club if you found a group of students who are also interested in research, and take turns at bringing an interesting paper along to talk about. There are also a number of online courses. My next slide has just got a couple of examples of free courses that you can use to develop your skills and also get certificates from. This is just a very important point here as well. If you are doing all these great things, that's excellent, but make sure you're getting some sort of record of it, either a certificate from your medical school or a letter of commendation, because at some point you will need this as evidence, and it would be such a shame if you've put the work in and you haven't got anything to be able to present. So these are just a few of the online free courses I've come across. So the Edward Jenner program, that's a leadership program that you have to do sort of a reflective essay at the end, and you to say that what you've learned from being a leader. Good clinical practice. It is a great place to start if you want to learn about how research is conducted. And then there are a number of other free resources I've noted on there. Most medical students, I believe, have Open Athens account, and that will give you access to e-learning for healthcare. And there's loads and loads of modules on there on professional development, but also clinical stuff if you're interested. Last thing to note really is about supervisors. So to do a project, you're going to need someone to supervise you. Doctors are very busy people. They obviously have lots of clinical commitments, but more senior doctors also quite often have roles in sort of management and other bits and pieces. So do be patient. I'd encourage you to get involved as early as possible. Everything just takes longer than you'll always think, regardless of what you're doing. So do have that in mind. It's also sort of relevant to note that not all doctors are academics as such. Everyone will have all the doctors you come across will obviously have a medical education, and they would have had they'd need to be able to practice evidence-based medicine, so reading papers and making clinical decisions based on the evidence that they've got. But not everyone has a particular interest in research, and it's worth considering or going around to ask someone if they'd be willing to work with you. My last point on there about finding who's responsive, if you email someone and ask them to ask if they're interested in supporting and they take 3 months to get back to you just to say yes, this gives you an idea of maybe the how busy they are and the sort of relationship you may have with them as a supervisor. So I'd just take a little record of that. Finally, just these are a few top tips. So be keen, get involved with as many things as you feel you can do alongside your medical degree. These will all be things that can help you later when you're applying for jobs, but also not just look good on your application, but actually to probably make you a better doctor. If you've got a teamwork experience and leadership skills, if you understand how research works, that looks good on anyone's watch. So get involved. Find something that you're passionate about, because it really makes a difference. If you're going to be spending your evening going through records of patients with leg ulcers and you have absolutely no interest in that, it's going to be hard work. So try and find yourself a project that really excites you and that you actually want to find the answer to the clinical question. And make sure you keep a note of the people that you've been in contact with, because they can come back and help you sort of years down the line. So that can be a really useful thing to do. Lastly, I just want to say that my philosophy is to always look forward and think that I'm looking after my future self. So it may not be something that's going to help me today or tomorrow, but actually later down the line, when I want to have a better work-life balance and get involved with more things outside of work. If you've got an impressive CV, you're more likely to get the opportunities if you make these opportunities for yourself early onwards. So I'd really encourage you to just put yourself out there and make the opportunities happen. And that's probably about all I've got to say. So I'd be very happy to take any questions that people have. And thank you very much for having me to speak today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Biggs. That was very informative. I've been literally taking notes the whole time. I'm like, okay, cool. So this, all right, intercalation, study days. There was definitely a few things in there that I had never heard of myself as well, especially the, what was the one? I think it was, study days. I'd never heard of that. And I didn't even know that there were courses that were like free to do. So you've definitely dropped a few key pieces of information there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So I have a couple of questions here.
Yeah, go for it.
First one up is in regards to publishing. So you did mention that it takes quite some time to get published, and obviously yours took, I think it was 4 or 5 years. So kind of two questions, I guess. Is that the norm? And then also, how did you deal with that length of time? How were you able to cope with that?
So The length of time that it takes for something to get published can kind of depend on a number of things. So when I said the project I did at my intercalation, so that was back in sort of 2015-16, and it was 2019 when it got published. What I actually did was I did a bit more work on it from my sort of dissertation to it had to be cut down considerably to the length that the journal wanted it. It was also, I don't think it was I tried submitting it one journal, and I think it was rejected because the publishers thought that it wasn't the right journal for that topic. So I then submitted it to a different different journal, which then it got published. For me, most of the delays I've come across with publishing my work, so I've got 4 publications currently. The delays have actually come from waiting for supervisors to get back to me about things. So I've made changes and I've sent it to them, and then I've waited months before they've actually come back to me. And you'll find with a lot of journals that you have to sign to say that all of the authors are happy with the submission when you submit it. So you don't want to get yourself into trouble. So it's one of those things that you want to be able to make sure everyone's happy with. And also, so this can obviously be, for me, I'd intercalated and gone back to Brighton, and if they weren't someone I could go and find on the ward and say, oh, you know that work we did, can you make sure you look at it? Which is obviously a bit more of a challenge if you're doing something remotely. But it's still worth doing. And if you get yourself, some things take much quicker than others. So I did a systematic review during my F1 year, and that's already been published. So it really depends on your supervisor, the type of project, and also how long each journal takes to process. Because some of them will take months just to give you back the initial decision, which might be a no, and others will tell you within a relative short period of time.
Okay. So it really does depend on a lot of different things then.
Yeah, and it's kind of why I put a bit of stress about the supervisor bit, about making sure that you find someone bear in mind how long someone takes to respond to your initial email, because if they take that long just to say yes, think how long it's going to take them to read your whole paper.
Yeah, maybe they should come to they should have been at our time management talk that we did. That would have been good for those supervisors right there.
I think that's good advice.
The next question actually kind of relates to supervisors, and it says, if a doctor asks you to get involved with their research, how do you distinguish between like a good research project and what has been described as a dead-end research project?
So I would try and find out some more information about what the project's about. And there's nothing stopping you doing a literature review. So having a look what's already published on it. Because if there's already a paper published on that, no one's going to want to publish your paper if it's almost identical topic. There's also, so some things are much more publishable than others in terms of when you're finding an audit to do. So some audits will be part of a national requirement. So for example, I've just finished working in the maternity department, and every year they have to do an audit about mortality within about maternal death. And so that wouldn't be a good one to get involved with, because a conference wouldn't necessarily be interested in you presenting that, because it's something that the hospital has to do anyway, just to sort of tick the boxes. You really want to get involved in a project that you can put your own sort of stamp on. So, I mean, this could be that you say it's a survey with patients. You could add on your own questions to an existing survey, because then you'd still be generating some data that would be interesting, generate some interesting points for discussion that could potentially make a nice poster, for example. So I'd have a little think about what you could get out of it in terms of what research or what data would come out of it, and how useful that would be for everyone else to hear, if it's to whether it would likely generate something.
Okay, right. Yeah, so definitely just have a think again, more about what outcomes you kind of expect from the project.
So have a think about what the data might show, and who would be interested in that. Because if it's something that your hospital has done, that's maybe you've trialed something and it's worked really well, other hospitals might be interested in doing similar things. So that would be worth sharing, because it's sharing some knowledge that can better other people.
Okay. I'm with you there. Thank you. So last couple questions. If you could quickly talk about two things. So the first one is, they've written in like an abbreviation. So first of all, what does AFP and ACF stand for? And then the question actually is doing an AFP necessary for ACF, and how would you get onto ACF without AFP? Well, I don't know what either of those things are. So
sure. So AFP is an academic foundation program. What this means is that so for the normal foundation program, it's obviously 2 years, F1 and F2, and you'll do 3 4-month jobs each year. If you're an academic foundation program, what this means is you will get the equivalent to 4 months to do academic work. So for a lot of people, that's a dedicated block in the beginning of their F2 year, where they don't do any clinical work at all, and they will have a whole dedicated period to just do research. You will still get paid as if you're working in the hospital. If you're not doing any sort of out of hours work, so you're not doing any nights or weekends, you'll just be on the basic pay. But there's nothing stopping you doing locums if that's an issue for you. And it gives you an opportunity. It basically gives you an opportunity to be flexible with your own time. You'll have a supervisor. You'll set up a project with them, but you can also use that time to do other things. So get involved with some leadership roles, some audits, teaching, for example. The ACF is an academic clinical fellowship, and this is sort of the next step in an academic career pathway. You do not have to do an AFP to do an ACF, but all it means is if you have done an academic foundation program, you've got dedicated time to be working on projects and things. So there's absolutely nothing stopping you doing your own projects whilst you're working. I did when I was an F1. I did a couple of systematic reviews with my ENT team, because that's where I was working at the time. So there's nothing stopping you getting involved. It's just if you get onto an AFP program, it gives you dedicated time to do that, so you'll be paid to do the research as opposed to just doing it in your own time. And ACF is the next step. So whilst you're doing your specialty training, so you can do them in whatever you want. So if you wanted to be a surgeon, it means that for the first 3 years of your surgical training, you will get 75% will be normal and 25% will be for doing research. And the idea is that you do a project over those 3 years, and it should hopefully form the foundation for you applying to do a PhD or an MD, which is what you need to do if you wanted to go on to a permanent role in research. You'd then apply for a clinical lectureship, and then you'd end up with a permanent role sort of within a university, doing research alongside your clinical work.
hey, thank you. That definitely cleared it up for me. I had no idea what the terms were. So the final question, would you be able to just shed a bit more light about, you said you published a letter to an editor. Could you just explain kind of what that entailed in like the last minute or so?
Yeah, of course. So this was something I did as a first year student. It's probably one of the easiest ways to get published, because if you the only thing you really need to have is an idea. So my letter was on, it was called The Homogenization of Medical Students. And it was about the idea that medical students are all made to be the same. We all have to have these things to stand out. They want you to get involved in sport and be captain of this and that when you apply, and all these things on your portfolio. But actually, we all have that, and then once you get into medical school, they want you to kind of go down a certain career path. So that's what my letter was on. I think it was about 300 words, something like that, so a couple of paragraphs, and I submitted it to Medical Teacher, which is a journal that, so some journals you have to pay to publish. They have something called APC, which is article processing fees or costs, but some of them don't. So it's worth finding which ones are free. I know Medical Teacher is a journal that accepts quite a lot of letters to editors. And as medical students, publishing about medical education is fairly easy because you guys are in the system. Like, you can talk about your experiences. If you've got something you want to reflect on, put it into a letter, and maybe someone will be interested in publishing it. So it's worth doing, and it may give you an easy publication to put on your CV.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you very much for clearing that up.
It's all right.
This has been an incredible talk. Thank you for all of the wisdom you've imparted. I know that a lot of people there's a lot of questions here that we'll talk through afterwards in the smaller Zoom chat. But yes, thank you very much, Dr. Biggs. And I know everybody watching is also thanking you through me for your incredible talk. Caleb, would you be able to share the next screen? Thank you. So for everybody watching on YouTube, I know that this talk has probably whetted your appetite a little bit more. You can find the other talks that we've done on our YouTube channel. And if you are interested in getting involved in our work and finding out a bit more about what we do, here are all of our socials on the screen. And you can join our community with the following link there. So yes, for everybody who is already part of the team, TAMS members, everybody just stay around so that we can go into, I guess, the second half of our event today. So yes, thank you very much for joining, guys.